Hi. Okay, so I wanted to do just give you a little bit of information about a lot of questions that I've been getting about IEPs and 504s, and if you have a client or a child that needs a little bit more advocation for support through the processing of getting an IEP and or updating an IEP for any reason. So hopefully these will answer some of the questions that you've had, but you can always reach out. So let's start with the process. So when a child is starting to have some challenges academically, they typically will see an IEP and a 504 that is established. But before that, it's such a process. So generally, the parental unit and or the teacher will reach out to the opposite and say, hey, we have some concerns, whether they're developmental or academic or behavioral, and they will suggest an SST meeting. An SST stands for Student Support Team, and that is for the establishment of everybody being on the same page and saying, hey, we're all acknowledging that there is some deficits, maybe some delays, or if they have other diagnoses already, then those will be addressed at that time. So typically, if you have a diagnosis, you probably most likely already have a 504 or an IEP, but if it's still being established, an SST is usually where they start, and that is to see if they can support the child in the classroom setting, and as well as bridging that academic support at home before or in lieu of a need of IEP. So the teacher will establish what the goals are, what the hindrances are in the classroom, and that will establish that there is a legitimate concern. But that doesn't start an IEP and it doesn't start a 504. So if a child is in need of a 504 or IEP, the parent has to actually request that. And there's another video that I put in. You basically have to write a letter to the school district and give it to your principal. And address it to your school's child psychologist. Your child will need to get evaluated, and then that typically takes 6 months. And then from that point, they will establish the needs for an IEP if there is one. So just so that we're clear on what the process is and where it usually starts and so forth. So let's just say your child, whether it's your client or your child or your student, has an IEP or a 504. So the difference between just a standard IEP is you're addressing deficits and setting goals for and accommodations for this child. So they're not meeting academic levels that need to be met for a number of reasons. And so these goals will be set in place, accommodations will be made. The meeting is held with the parental team, the school administration, speech, anything that is going to be needed, the school nurse, and the teaching team. So this is just a whole large group of collaboration that everybody needs to be at, and it will be documented, and then those goals and accommodations will be documented and agreed upon there. And so that's the kind of the time where the parents have the floor to say, hey, this is not something that I can do at home. I really need help in this area, and or ask all the questions that you want, which are, how is this need going to meet my child's goal in the classroom? What is exactly going to be done? What exactly cannot be done? And that kind of thing. So that's the meeting time for everybody to just kind of have those conversations. Some of them can be a little bit uncomfortable, but they need to be had, and then the goals will be set and the accommodations will be made, and that's looked at throughout the school year. And then annually is typically when these IEPs are modified in any way, added to, change, because as we want goals to be reached, right? So where teachers are always taking data and getting evidence from what their children in the classroom are doing, what's not working, and that kind of thing. So it does take time, of course, to work with the child and to gather that data. So of course we look at it as an annual IEP update. So for a 504 is for medical disability. And typically, so like, for example, my son started with a 504 because, hey, he had a medical disability that was hindering his learning experience, and it brought him 2 grade levels behind. So as we got his health under control and his disability, we were able to determine that he didn't really need a 504 anymore. He now has an IEP. And that is just to make sure that his goals and his accommodations are still being maintained within the school setting, as well as meeting the goals for future growth. So as far as advocating, I would say the most important part, if you were a teacher or if you were a parent, especially if you're an advocate yourself, you are probably most likely going to be the kind of the odd man out if you're a parent or an advocate. Because I say that because these are the people that are the deal breakers, right? I really need this accommodation to be made. And it's not to say that the school system isn't supportive, but they're out resourced, right? They have so many children with IEPs and 504s and medical accommodations, academic accommodations, that they just don't have the resources to meet all of these children. We don't have enough BCBAs, we don't have, you name it. And so of course we do need more funding, we do need more people, and that isn't a reason not to meet your child's or client's recommendations, accommodations, or needs. It's just a reality of something to be aware of. So with that being said, it's a very emotional state where the parents have to deal with when they are establishing and trying to get questions answered about their child and their child's accommodations. And it can also be very emotional for an advocate, whether you are the client's RBT, BCBA, you name it. If you're being called to the meeting to give your insight on the data that you've collected or what you've worked on with this child, you have a voice. But it's really important to be respectful and to remember that your voice is there to bridge the gap between what the teachers need to understand and what the parents need accommodated. And so when I say be respectful, not that anybody goes into a meeting like this to be disrespectful or anything. Emotions can really take hold of us and turn our articulation. It could confuse us. It can get us frustrated. There's just a lot to process for an adult who is not in this profession. And so it's really, really important to have all of your I's dotted, T's crossed, know your information, know your client, know their needs, write your own goals down for them to go into this meeting. There's a lot of preparation to go into the meeting to know about the child, and so that you can articulate what those goals are in a very professional way. And so when I say that is, and this is in another video which goes into a little bit more in depth, if you are the parent or the advocate, there's a binder that I would suggest that you create for your child so that it shows you're being responsible, you're being responsive, you are there to support the child, and they are going to take you seriously because it just gives you a little bit more accountability for, yes, you do know what you're talking about as far as it goes for this child. You have all of your documentation and your information about this child, and it sets the attitude that you're serious, but you're looking for, the goal is to support this child and his accommodations, and not necessarily just to get accommodations and special treatment, if that makes sense. So have a really just respectful attitude for your administration. If you feel like they're not supporting you and you're just another number, or someone's checked out, or they're just giving you a lot of excuses, ask respectful questions. And if they don't have the answers, allow them time to obtain that. And if they don't have the answers, you will run into some people in administration and in the school district that don't know the laws and they don't know the rules and they may not even know their own policies. And so it's important to brush up on that a little bit, know your district's policies, know the state, ask them for that information, or if you have it, you can supply it for them, because you want to be respectful and give them the information. It's going to be a little bit of a training tool for them, for you to educate them and say, I'm not trying to be, what's the word? A pain. You're not trying to add more work for them. The goal is to make accommodations to help the development of this child. And if that needs to be an accommodation, then it needs to be an accommodation. And you have the rights to do that. So I really want to reiterate, having an open conversation. I have had many conversations, being an advocate, being a parent, being an RBT, and advocating for a client and their needs. We like especially for me, like me, the example of me as an RBT is me as an RBT. I go into some meetings and go, my client's made like such progress and they're doing so good and they need X, Y, and Z. We also have to look at the bigger picture, because the reality is that there are some things that just reality sets in, and they don't have the resources to make that. Like a child could be dyslexic and you need a completely different program for dyslexia and a completely different teacher. Well, that's not the reality of what the school district can provide. So knowing what their needs are, but knowing also what can and cannot be provided is really important. And it's nobody's fault. Nobody's in trouble. We all have to really be on the same page. I've gone into a lot of meetings with people that I don't respect, I don't care for, but I still have to maintain my respectful attitude and my position, because we don't want to create barriers and boundaries between administration and RBT or BCBA or advocate. We want to get away from any, this is my position, this is my knowledge, and I know more than you. We don't want to go down that road. We can respectfully educate other professionals in a very positive way, because here's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is for your child to get these services. And if you are a parent that is not articulating things in a respectful way, it's not that it's not the law. It is the law. They have to accommodate what your child needs, especially if there is a diagnosis in place. However, you're building a negative rapport with that administration. And we're human, and we internalize that, and it does trickle down to your child, unfortunately. And so I always just tell myself, I need this teacher to understand my child's needs so that they want to help my child. And the more positive and the more you understand and share your support for that educating team and the administration, and show your understanding for, what they can and cannot do, and you get it, the reality of the system, they're going to want to help you and your child more. So you want to build a bridge and not build a wall. So it's just really important, no matter where you are as an advocate or an RBT or a BCBA or a parent, we really want to keep that bridge open so that they want to, and you're not kissing anybody's butt, or you're not, overindulging, but you are acknowledging that they are doing the best they can. And a lot of the times they're just undereducated, they're under-resourced, and they just don't know how to accommodate your child's needs. So it's just really important to go into a meeting with that information. And articulation is going to be super key. So when I say, like, have your questions down, like, what are your initial questions as a parent, right? Go through them, say them out loud, because sometimes the question can be too general. And when we really get into like advocating for an IEP or a 504, it gets very specific to your child, to your client, to their goals. And sometimes when we go into meetings with too general of questions, our answers don't get met. And then we leave going, oh, but what about this? And oh, what about that? And in that emotional state of where you are in the meeting, a lot of things can be forgotten or missed. And so I can't even tell you how many times I've walked away going, oh, I forgot to ask that question, or wait, okay, they answered this, but then I didn't really fully process it, and now I have more questions. So have, a preliminary meeting with like a teacher or your BCBA or RBT parents together, so that you can just kind of all like, well, what about this? What about that? I've done that with, as an RBT, I've done that with my clients' teachers. We'll collaborate with each other, building that bridge too, because sometimes that's also not welcomed as an RBT or BCBA. Sometimes educators and the ABA world don't really match, or they don't really understand each other, and so it's really important to be able to bridge those worlds for the client's well-being, and then you can really collaborate and articulate and support each other in different ways for that client. So mull over some questions. I've been very blessed and very lucky to work with teachers that want to share information, as far as like, if I have a question of like this, how the system works, they'll share with me their experiences. I'm trying to give you an example, like, why is this client have a ABA that's consistent every single day? They have a full-time ABA through school, and this client in this classroom doesn't. And so there's so many different needs and accommodations that need to be met, that of course not one child is a carbon copy, and so their different needs are accommodated in different ways. And so they might have a paraprofessional. It's important for you to know where the role is and what are all the different roles on the campuses if you are in a school setting and a campus. And if you are, even if you're an RBT and you're doing in-home therapy, it's really important for you to know what the school setting is, because then you know what's really being supported, and you can just make those bridges all that much better. So for like example, when I was doing home ABA, it's such a different world than ABA in schools. You're with the client, of course, many more hours than just, depending on what company you're with, it could just be a couple of hours that you're with a client. And the goals look very different, because they're a little bit more clinical goals than they are academic goals, which would be in a school setting. So right now I'm actually in a school setting as an RBT, and I get to collaborate with the speech therapist and the OT and the teacher and the BCBA, and all of these really important things might be a different experience in a home therapy. But it's really important for you to even, like for me to even know, does my client receive ABA at home? And what does that look like? So that we can also address that in the IEP, because ultimately we want this client to grow, right? We want them to get through their goals, set new goals. It's an ongoing thing, right? And so it's really important that we know maybe we're not going to be able to meet those goals the same way or do it, but it's really important for you to know what those goals are at school is what they are at home, and so forth. So that's just information to have in your back pocket, and then it will help you understand just the system and how it works a little bit more. And then as far as like an IEP, you can really start to see the different system as far as like clinical ABA and academic ABA, and meeting the accommodations of an IEP. So let me know what kind of questions you guys have that I can address. I've had lots of experiences with clients having IEPs. My own children have IEPs and 504s, what goal setting looks like. And it's a lot of technical words as far as it is on paper, but when you can break those down as a parent or an ABA facet for like an RBT, then you can really start to get into like, what are these actual goals mean, and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? And that way you can actually advocate for your client better, knowing what the goals are and how they're being accommodated every day and every week, so that you can kind of see, oh, well, why is this taking so long to get here? Or this actual goal really isn't being met by this accommodation because of XYZ. So those are the things that we probably need to look at in depth a little bit more, so that we can kind of have that conversation of, what is the goal moving forward, and what are the changes that we need to be made. A parent can always ask for a renewed IEP meeting to make accommodations and adjustments throughout the school year. They don't need to wait for that 1 year. It would just be really important for you to be prepared to understand that it might not necessarily change accommodations or goals, but to understand them better. So if you're really not understanding them, I would say start there and how they're being addressed on a daily basis. And then you can kind of go from if it's really needed to be modified or changed, and so forth. So I hope that was helpful. And I hope to see you again with some questions, and I will do my best to let you know what I've experienced, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. So have a great day. Don't forget to process and play. Bye-bye.